All right, guys. Today, joining us on the podcast is Cara Ladd. Cara is a business development brand consultant and journalist who has worked with many publications, including Cosmopolitan, Italian Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Esquire, Forbes, and more. After 6 years of hustling in the New York City fashion industry, the material world was the focus and foundation of her life. She worked too long, stressed too much, and was mentally and physically burnt to a crisp. In December 2016, her busy lifestyle came to an abrupt halt when she was diagnosed with a rare soft tissue cancer known as synovial sarcoma. She was 24 years at the time. During her battle with cancer, spirituality acted as her guiding light, a source of strength, and a powerful release. It comforted her through 8 months filled with 5 lengthy chemotherapy sessions, 2 radical leg surgeries, and 35 exhausting radiation sessions. Having recovered from her cancer battle, she has a fresh focus on self-healing, mindfulness, and a new career path. She now represents and works with purpose-driven brands in wellness, sustainability, and clean beauty through Boundless by Cara, a personal brand extension of her work where she and her contributors write about personal brand experiences, reviews, and partnerships in the conscious lifestyle and wellness sector. So with that, I'd like to welcome in Cara Ladd. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. It was well done.
I guess Les has given us, some highlights, I would say, of your later life, it sounds like. But what I'd really love to do, Cara, is to invite you to tell us your origin story, where you come from, what life was like for you leading up to this point. As much detail as you'd like to go, we'd love to hear it, to know how you've come to be Cara of today.
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, just thank you so much for welcoming me into this space and into this conversation. It's really great to connect with you both. So I have not always lived in New York City. I'm currently looking at the skyline of New York. I was not born and raised here, far from it. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, so smack dab in the middle of the United States. I had a pretty typical, to be honest, white middle class privileged upbringing. I didn't really, face that much trouble or trauma in my upbringing, which I'm really grateful for it. I have 2 lovely parents. I was raised half Jewish, half Christian, which that dichotomy kind of laid the foundation for my spirituality today. We kind of were raised in this flexible, fluid, spiritual, religious container. We weren't really siloed to anything, which in retrospect, just really molded who I am on today in a spiritual way. I have one lovely brother who lives in Colorado now. That's where I went to school, and that's where the majority of my family is today, in the mountains. I went to school at Boulder. I studied business marketing. Definitely had that work hard, play hard lifestyle. I partied a ton, to be honest. And that's kind of how I was living as a young professional in New York as well. I worked really, really hard, but I played really hard as well. That's kind of how it was in the fashion industry, which is where I got my start overall in my career. And that's also where I feel like I, burnt myself out. And it's kind of crazy looking back on my life pre-cancer. It feels like it's like I've lived 2 separate lives almost. And this one that I'm in right now, living in New York, and on this purpose-driven path full of spirituality, not that my path pre-cancer wasn't filled with depth, but it felt like a little disconnected to my truth or my authentic self, if that makes sense. It was almost like I was living in I had a facade, and I feel like living in this day and age with so much social media, digital distractions, it's easy to get distracted from your core identity, your core authentic truth and self. And so that's kind of what I help people embody today, is really how to tap into your true purpose, and how to build a brand that is layered with impact beyond profit, so you can help others find their purpose and create just kind of this ripple purpose effect and impact throughout the planet. But yeah, that was kind of a long-winded, well-rounded, or at least attempted well-rounded answer of kind of where I came from. Hailed from the Midwest, and now I'm on the East Coast. I also lived in London, actually, right after college as well. So have some international experience there and travel frequently, but I guess not right now.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that, Cara. Really appreciate that. And, you know, there's a lot of interesting threads that I'd love to sort of dive into. And maybe it makes sense for us to go a little bit further back. And it's interesting to me that you paint this picture of this, you know, this half Jewish, half Christian upbringing, and how that sort of paved a little bit of a spiritual foundation for you to who you are now. Because I know that now that you're a very, you know, in-depth spiritual practitioner in very many different senses. And I guess Jewish and Christian spirituality may be a little bit different in terms of that, I guess, those very specific doctrines. But I want you to talk a little bit more about that and your upbringing, and how that, you know, looking back, how that may have, I guess, influenced and helped you in terms of finding yourself spiritually today.
Yeah, so my mom's side of the family is Christian, and my dad's side is Jewish, and we celebrated both holidays, but in a, I guess, more of like a casual way. Like spirituality and religion for us was more about connection to each other, you know, family, taking time offline, you know, disconnecting to reconnect, and just like learning how to fill yourself outside of these external things that we find fulfilling on a daily basis. And, you know, to be frank, I'm not fully well versed when it comes to Christianity or Judaism, just because my family was so casual about it. I guess my mom, her mother was actually really active within the church, and actually lived in like a convent for a period of time, was all about service and giving back to others. And I remember during like Christmas, she would even, it was always, she never really had presents for us. She always just like, it would be like a well in Africa in our name. Like it was all about giving. And I think having those pillars and those, just those like values ingrained in me at such a young age really laid the foundation for spirituality in like a nonconformist way, which is what I believe spirituality is all about. Like I don't really have one specific definition for what spirituality is, and that's why I find it so beautiful and why I connect with it. I feel like on such a deep level is because, you know, you can break through, you can unbound from these silos that we've created in society. We break through this programming and these lessons that are this programming, these stories, and we kind of create our own. And I think that's what is so beautiful about spirituality, and resonates with me, because that's what happened to me on a physical plane. Like when I was diagnosed with cancer, I kind of was stripped of all these stories and these programmings that I took on throughout my life up until 24. And I kind of came back to this like raw version of me, and was able to like just connect with myself and my soul on a deep level. And so I guess those two religious paths, you know, taught me a lot in the broader sense. They probably have common threads throughout those doctrines, right?
Totally.
And and that I think just that connectedness to something, to a purpose is what influenced me the most. Not anything like specific that I can pull, but it's just that like connectedness to purpose, to soul, to family, and to like make an impact beyond your own like life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, you know, what I get from what you've just shared, and I think you and I would share common threads here with this regard. You know, I was sort of raised and baptized as a Catholic, but I never really practiced, you know, devoutly, if at all, to be frank. But, you know, there's a couple of things and a couple of words that you sort of mentioned with regards to, you know, principles and values, regardless of what doctrine it is. There are underlying principles and values that we can take from religious teachings, which in my sense and my belief is the point of, you know, religious teachings. And then connectedness in all senses of the word. You know, you talked about, you know, the foundations laid by your parents in terms of connecting on a physical level with your loved ones around you, you know, the tactile sort of connection between people that you care about, and sharing experiences, you know, making that connection there, and then connecting with yourself and finding a better sense of, you know, self in a much deeper sense of the word, you know, that sort of transcends the identity from a egoic standpoint, and you know, these masks that we sort of wear in society. Yeah, totally. I feel you on that one. But I want to bring Shauno into the conversation, because Shauno, a little bit different to us in terms of religious practice. Shaun's quite devout in terms of his religious belief and daily practice. And I want to sort of bring you into the conversation, mate, and share your thoughts based on everything that we've sort of just said as well. And I'm sure there's some common threads there as well that we can pick.
Yeah, man, I would say there's lots of common threads. So I guess, yeah, I'm Zoroastrian, right? And the whole religion is based on good words, good thoughts, good deeds. That's the premise of the religion, right? And it's a pretty liberal religion in terms of, I guess, its doctrines. And by liberal, I mean there's not a lot of restrictive, prescriptive sorts of things that you need to adhere to, right? It's really good words, good thoughts, good deeds. So I think I bring that up because that really, I guess, sets the tone for my religious practice, right? If you want to call it a religious practice, it's more of a life practice that I try to adhere to. But what you mentioned about connectedness, I think that's really what it's about, right? And you mentioned the connection with your family that you had through religion. For me, what I've noticed is it's one of those common threads within my family, right? It's one thing that we all kind of like, that we're all conscious of, which we all try to live by, right? And it's this commonality that we have, and because of that commonality, we have an understanding about a lot of different things, and that, you know, it bolsters our connection, I feel. And then there's certain things within our religion which are significant to us, like certain days and things like that have a significance, and we connect on those things. And for me, really, that's what, you know, they're the things that religion has helped me with in terms of the connectedness. And if I didn't have those things, I think my relationship with my family would be very different. And my relationship with myself and my relationship with God would be very different, right? I think a lot of, when you hear the word religion, there's a lot of dogma attached to that. And I've sort of never really thought about it that way. So I pray every day. As Zoroastrians, we have a specific way that we pray, but it's not like you have to pray morning, noon, and night. There's certain people within the religion that say you must do certain things, but, you know, for the most part, for me, it's always been about the feeling. I've never been worried that, like, if I don't say the right thing, God's going to punish me, or if I don't pray in this particular way, or if I don't hold my hands in a particular way, it's going to really affect, you know, the message or what we receive and things like that. But having a deep spiritual deep spiritual connection, I guess, I would call it, has really, it's a foundation for me. It's a foundation for my life. And what you mentioned though, the connectedness is really what it's about. And I think it's interesting, because you said it was very casual. For me, like my religiousness and with my family stuff, it feels pretty casual, but then when I think about it more deeply, like it's pretty strong, like it's very strong. And I guess you could think of those things in a dichotomous way, like casual or the strength of it. But yeah, that's what it's like for me. But that connection part, yeah, when you said that, it really, hit home for me.
Yeah, and it's also like the connectedness to not only our families and ourselves, but like each other, like every single one on this planet, right? It shines light that we are all interconnected. We all have some sort of prayer, whether you are, you're praying while you're making like cacao in the morning or a cup of coffee, or you're sitting on a meditation cushion, or you're taking a walk through the woods. Like we all have different kinds of prayers, and it teaches us to be more flexible and in flow rather than rigid. In some religions, I mean, some religions you can definitely argue are more rigid, but I think what we keep on coming back to is the connectedness, but what we haven't touched on is the connectedness to like each and every person on this planet, and how we are all birthed from the same earth and from like the same stars overall, the same universe, to get like woo and spiritual. And that's like probably the greatest common thread throughout all spiritual religions overall, right? It's just like the interconnectivity that we all are like brothers and sisters at the end of the day.
Yeah. For sure. I think we are. And I've got this theory, right, that like whoever we're praying to, whether you're Jewish or Christian or Zoroastrian or Buddhist, or it's like, I think we're all praying to the same force, the same, universal being that there is. Well, it's not a being, but like this same universal force, right? There's just different people throughout time who've delivered the message. And then along the way, it's kind of gotten muddied or really restrictive within different religions, right? I think, Jesus was one person that spoke about the word. Muhammad was one person that spoke about the word. Zarathustra was one person that spoke about the word. They had this, I guess, connection, and they were able to relay the things that they were speaking to God about, right? Or the feelings that they had, or the things that they were experiencing in a way that was able to, be, I guess, taken on by other people and understood to push forward. But I think it's all the same guy, or woman, or being, or force, or whatever it is, right? But it just gets, I feel it gets muddied along the way, and there's some interest in things like that, people trying to impose their will, and they kind of use religion as the guise for that.
I also think it's really interesting how, I can't remember the article that I read this in, but how Generation Z is like detaching from all religions and just leaning fully into spirituality. Like this, it doesn't even have like, a name or a tag or a categorization of any kind, but like it's essentially like the millennials created like work is our religion, or was our religion, and now we're like Gen Z, and like everyone is trying to like lean more into spirituality as a whole. I mean, we're all tethered to probably some religion of some sort, but I thought that was like fascinating that Gen Z is like the one that is really like doesn't identify the most with any religion. So I wonder what the generation after that is going to be, like what resonates with them.
Yeah, I think it's possibly like this. Look, that throughout history we sort of move through the different cycles, and we sort of learn from past experience from our forefathers and ancestors, right? And I guess that sometimes we get lost along the way. And I think that right now we're starting to see a real, it's quite palpable, the conscious shift across the world. And it perhaps is partly because we are so much more connected than ever before, but with that, that visibility, I suppose, across different other sides of the world, we can really see that there's a real conscious effort to look inward rather than outward in all aspects. And I think that everything that we've sort of talked about to this point is really relevant to that decoupling from, dogmatic, ideals about, a certain person that is painted in a very specific way that we should honor and pray to in a very specific way. And I love how you said, the different methods of prayer. And that's a beautiful point to raise, as well as this identity and semblance of God, of a God, or whatever that presence is for you. In my sense of it, it's all subjective, right? It's all a subjective sort of understanding and a conversation with the divinity within each of us, and then as well as outside of us, because it's really the same thing. Because, like you said, we're all connected at some way, and like I don't really feel that we need to even raise the caveat of being too woo-woo or whatever, because at a very scientific atomic level, we are all made of the same thing and comprised of the same sort of substance. So if we break it down to that level, which science loves to do with its reductionist approach, then we are all exactly the same thing, made of the same sort of matter at a very physical level. So there is that, and I think that like I said, that prayer, that form of prayer, whatever you want to call it, meditation, self-talk, that's a conversation with that divinity within ourselves, which is just a conversation with ourselves to better understand ourselves, which is then a better understanding of the divinity that is around all of us, that is connected with everyone, which is a better understanding of the everything, essentially, right? The whole connectedness of everything, the oneness of everything. And yeah, I just love that we're starting to sort of peel back the layers of, I guess, idealism, labels, dogmatic approaches, and just finding it okay to have a subjective, interpretation of whatever spirituality means for each and every individual, without, feeling like, we're getting judged or whatever about it. So yeah, I think it's a great direction that we're sort of heading towards. It's quite revelatory, and yeah, I think it's a great direction.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that was really well said. And I feel like you grounded it really beautifully. And one thing that you touched on was we all kind of have the tools within, which I feel like is a phrase that we're hearing more and more as this mindfulness movement really moves to the masses, and people start to embrace more and more modalities that are, again, these external tools, but they're just that, they're tools to help you find the healer within. And that's how that was kind of the first step in me creating the Boundless method, which is our 4-part process to greater spiritual self-discovery that we use as the grounded foundation in our consulting for Fortune 500 companies and startups to our coaching for individuals. And that first step is all about getting quiet. We call it inbound. And that is the most powerful stage out of anything. It's just beginning and that turning inward. And I feel like that's why we're in this huge up level in consciousness right now in this mindfulness movement. You could say meditation is probably one of the first more it's not even esoteric, but one of the more mindfulness practices that's being adopted. And is having kind of this domino effect with other modalities. I mean, of course, Eastern modalities like acupuncture, some of these modalities obviously have been around for ages, but when it comes to transcending into the Western world, meditation is the first one. It's all about getting quiet. And it's interesting as that has been adopted and some of these leaders like Headspace and Calm really become, mainstream, we're really starting to see the tipping point of the mindfulness movement overall. And at such a beautiful time, or you can say beautiful and dark time, tumultuous time during COVID, where it's quiet, like everyone is getting quiet and facing their fears and turning inward. And that's where the real work begins, is when you silence the noise, turn off maybe your phone, or you just start to detach from these external experiences, like commuting, or just like meeting with friends, or just numbing out in general. And you start to sit with yourself, and then shit comes to the surface, and you're like, oh my gosh, like that's where the self-discovery begins, is that turning inward and realizing that, oh my gosh, like there's more than meets the eye. There are so many layers to peel back. And that's kind of what being boundless is all about, is kind of that infinite journey of self-discovery. There's always more peeling back. There's always more self-discovery. It's ever evolving. But it also kind of that getting quiet, or at least for me, and that's what I teach others. It's all about that getting quiet.
It's interesting that you brought that part up. I've talked about this before on the podcast, but it's really pertinent to what you were saying. So the way we've set this podcast up, I guess, is, and our archetypes is, Les is the flow and I'm the hustle, right? And I've been about that for a long time. So, and all the things you associate with that. But for a really long time, I was just trying to find all the hacks, all the ways to do stuff, looking externally for everything, everything. I got to find the way to do this. There has to be a more efficient way. If there was something that I wanted to work out or achieve, I'd be like, and I couldn't, it didn't appear to be, very obvious. I'd be like, maybe you need to force it, and it would be all external, is my point. And then Les used to always say to me, he's like, dude, everything you need is within you. Mm-hmm. Right. And he's going to laugh because he laughs every time I say this, but every time he used to tell me that, I'd be like, yeah, man, I'd be like, yep. And I was like, yeah, it sounds good. Like, I get where you're coming from, but it didn't sit with me. Right. Until I can't even remember. I can't pinpoint when. One day I was just like, I need to listen to that, because he keeps saying it. And what I'm doing right now doesn't feel like it's working. And by working, I mean, I don't feel like I wish I felt, or how I think I want to feel. And then I started to do that work and go inward. And it started with quietening my world and everything around me, and stop taking in so much shit from every direction, hoping that one of them will be the right thing, and just plucking that one out and then latching onto that and thinking that's what's going to do it. And when I did get quiet, I started to work out those things within me. And what I want to share with people is, I think there's so much more within us than we know about, than we're conscious of, when we're constantly bombarding ourselves with all this external shit. And I just want to bring it up because it was profound for me, and it's changed everything for me going forward. So now, like, when something is not sitting right with me, or I'm not feeling, I'm just not feeling it, I'm like, you need to quiet down, man. Don't start looking for all these other ways to get shit done, or to work out how to do this, or ask this person, or listen to this podcast, or read this article about 10 ways to do it. It's like, it's not that, man. Just quiet down, slow down, look within. That's where you need to start. And it sounds to me like that's what you've worked out, and with that inbound process.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that still resonates with me. I still spin out regularly, I'm human. But I think it's that greater awareness of, okay, I'm searching outside myself for all of these tools, but in reality, I just need to take a step back, take a breath, take a walk. It doesn't have to be this huge introspective process, but it's just like, do less, a little bit more. It's something that we don't do enough of. And I feel like that's when, the most profound downloads, that's when the most profound ideas, the most game-changing ideas have really come to the forefront of my mind, is when I'm doing way, way, way less. It's not when I'm like in the weeds trying to figure out inefficiencies of my business and like systems and everything. It's actually like just when I take a step back I breathe. And I think that's why meditation, and things of that sort and of the like, forest bathing and everything like that. Yeah. Just turning inward a little bit more have gotten so popular. It's because people are starting to realize that that's when the biggest revelations, the biggest ideas typically happen.
Totally. And I think that there has to be something to the fact that, the art of meditation is something that has, been around since recorded history, and, who knows how long before that, right? And it still is a prevalent act today, and it's a life-changing discipline today, right? And I don't think it ever will change from that. So there must be something to that, to the fact that it has survived for so long. And I love the way that you sort of paint it as a boundless, like with the word boundless. It's a beautiful thing to say, because it does really speak to the fact that the work that we sort of delve into, if we want to use the the imagery of the rabbit hole, whatever it is, it is truly infinite. But the layers just get more deeper and deeper, and there's more nuance and more color and more sort of idiosyncratic revelations the more that you delve down into this. And it truly is just like it's just like getting to know yourself more and more and more, and each time you sort of like find out more about yourself that you really don't you haven't realized that was there, but maybe on a visceral level you sort of knew it, but you couldn't intellectualize it. It's a beautiful thing. And I really want to come back and ask you about this, Cara, and sort of talk to a bit more, because I think the story that you share about these the pre and post lives of cancer that you had, the two lives and two guys, like I feel like our stories, they're so very similar. They're so very similar. Before it was exactly the same thing as I guess both of you guys would have described in your both personal journeys, is that when there's something that I guess we were uncomfortable with within our lives, I would seek some sort of solace outside, some sort of escape outside, whether it would be drugs and alcohol and things like this, and maybe you guys sort it in different ways, or another way to sort of help me relieve whatever tension or trauma I was feeling. But it will always direct me inward. It always would in the end. But it then came a choice point for me to choose whether I wanted to dive in, or again ignore it and look outward. And I partied a lot before I was diagnosed, and then I feel like our sort of timeline and treatment timeline was exactly the same. I had 35 radiation sessions as well. I had 5 chemo sessions afterwards. It was about an 8-month treatment period. It was just a different type of cancer, I think. But it was really a catalytic moment for waking me up and changing the trajectory of my life. I took up meditation to help me manage the stress and anxiety and everything else that came with cancer. But then I now am a student and a teacher, and I have meditation programs, and I am a great advocate for it, and many other things. But I want you to talk through, and share your experience, and talk about those different lives that you lead, essentially, and how cancer was able to sort of, bring that new direction, or show you a new path, so to speak.
It's honestly such a loaded question, because I feel like, yeah, exactly to what you said. Like, I'm still such a student. Like, I feel like I'm a student every single day. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this life. But yeah, our stories are very much in parallel, which I find so fascinating. And I find fascinating with a lot of cancer patients and survivors. And I mean, it's it's like a complete juxtaposition. I mean, I'm still the same person, but yeah, those two lives are like they're in such contrast. And it's interesting because you mentioned Boundless, and I actually founded Boundless by Kara when I was in that first life. So it's like I had this deeper inner knowing, I had this wisdom within, but there was too much noise for me to really unearth what that meant in a profound spiritual way. You know, Boundless by Kara started as a fashion blog when I was working for Vogue UK and doing the Vogue Summer Intensive program in London. It wasn't this like, it didn't have this spiritual connotation. Similar to you, I was, tunnel vision for the fashion industry. And I didn't allow myself to grow and expand and be boundless or experience anything outside of the silo that I created as a tween. And I feel like I was tethered to that goal, which I'm very, very driven. I'm a Capricorn moon in astrology. So I'm very, very driven and like tied to like hard work and my career and my motive. And so that's kind of what consumed my first life, if you will, is that it was like heavily hardworking and fashion and play hard. I definitely like numbed out a ton when it comes to just like feeling my feelings. I mean, I drank a ton, and I did a lot of drugs too, but never in like a harmless way. It was just more like a social way. But I feel like I was like saddened or just numbing out because I didn't want to tap into some sort of truth that I didn't know was there. It was just like the uncertainty that you're going to have to lean into sooner or later. But it was still, I mean, I think I'm painting like quite a dark picture of this first life. It was like really joyous, and it was really like fun, and it laid the foundation for who I am today. It's just so different. And in that moment, in that first life, it is so interesting is I was happy. I thought I knew myself. And it wasn't until that out of body experience that I got from that life-changing phone call did I really realize like what more there is to life, which I've had this conversation a handful of times, and I feel like I change my answer and perspective frequently, but like, do you have to go through trauma to really experience enlightenment in some way, or wisdom or growth, which I don't know if I would be able to experience the growth that I've experienced or sit here and talk about spirituality, just consciousness in general, without that trauma. And it really, I mean, I was on a hamster wheel and I couldn't get off before, and I had to get knocked down in order for me to, get off and like really get to know myself and grow. And similar to you, it was a conduit for, I mean, everything that I've built today on like a mind, body, soul, and business level. It just like connected me. I was like moving on this path, and the universe was just like completely pivoted me. And I am so grateful for it. I'm not grateful for that cancer. I'm grateful for the wisdom and the path that it put me on, and like the growth stage that I'm on right now. I wouldn't wish cancer, that kind of trauma, onto anyone. But I feel like I wouldn't be where I am today at this level of consciousness without it, with this perspective. And Leslie, you said something so interesting about color in general. And that was one thing that I really realized when I was going through treatment, is that everything looked more vivid. Like at the end of it, like I had new eyes. It was like just this crazy experience. I mean, I had some of the most vision-inducing experiences sober, laying on a table getting Reiki from a healer, than I ever did on Molly at a Red Rock show in Boulder. Like I had some of the craziest experiences in my own mind, body, and soul, and tapping deep into those layers than I ever did when, I was like, tripping, I was like tripping on light. But it just brought so much, just brought a whole nother perspective, and lightness and that vividness. And just, I mean, it comes down to like presence, being in your body, and gratitude, right? I would just like, I remember, I think it was one of like my first or second year anniversaries of my diagnosis. And I was sitting in Madison Square Park, and I was just looking up at the trees. And I just was like, these are like the most beautiful trees, like if I would have talked to someone, people were like, this chick is high off of something. I was like, these are the most beautiful trees. They're so green. Like, look at these leaves. Like, they're insane. Like, this planet is so beautiful. And it just like, that dark time just brought so much light into my life, and such perspective, and such gratitude for the life that we are living. Like, when we break it down, we are these incredible vessels of energy. Like, it's just mind blowing when you get down to like the really meta of it. And I feel like I never would have, again, to take it back to those like 2 lives, like even when I was like so high out of my mind in college, like I never had these like deep thoughts. It's like when I'm sober and having these incredible conversations with other people that are on the same level or the same wavelength of consciousness is when I have like these awesome revelations and conversations, and just like, I don't know, aha moments. It's like the wisdom without all of the noise, I guess that's what wisdom is, right? I think that's a quote. It's like, I'll have to look at it after. I'll send it to you after, but it's like something about how wisdom is like the thoughts without the noise, or something like that, or deeper thoughts without noise. Anyways.
Yeah. So there's a lot of threads. There's a lot of beautiful things that you said there. What I want to, I guess, immediately sort of brings me back, and the way that I sort of explain it myself, and I've sort of been writing about this lately, is that I guess there's like many parts to who we are that make us who we are, but I think largely in the modern times we're sort of dominated by our intellectual minds, and that side of things, the very acute and square, angular way of thinking. It's very linear. And I sort of say that it's like a black and white way of thinking about things. You know what I mean? It's very angular. It's very boxy. It's straight lines, and we're just drawing boxes, and it's very technical in that manner. And it's not to say that it's good or bad, but the way that I describe it, it's black and white, right? It's the outline. But then our sensory mechanisms, our sight, our smell, our touch, all the visceral things in our body, that's what brings color to our experience of life, right? But I guess along the way, in terms of the human evolution of our species, of humanity, of society, of civilization, we sort of lost sight of that because of the rise of industrialization and capitalism, and how intellection was so profound and able to progress that at such a rapid pace. So we sort of said we don't need anything else, right? And that's how we sort of point our future in a sense, and it's sort of evident through our educational system and how it sort of honors and puts intellectual thought and knowledge on a pedestal and nothing else. And we're not taught how to really connect and be with our sensory equipment, essentially, and our sensory capabilities, and how to I guess not even marry, because they're already together, right? But like, to harmonize those things and bring color to the outlines, and bring color and nuance and beauty to the pictures. Like, I love to say, and it's basically my, personal creed, is that more in less, right? And it's only 3 words. It's very minimal, but there's so much to that. And that's more in terms of like exactly what you're saying, like we could see a tree as a tree, but then we can touch the tree and feel, the different textures and how that, flows through our body. We can see the leaves are not just green, but the different hues of green and how it changes subtly, and the little veins that flow through one single leaf. There's so much more depth in life than we, give credit, because we're sort of on this like speeding train. And the great analogy I feel is that we're sort of looking at life through the window of a speeding train, and it's just a blur, right? And these drugs that we take, and this is my personal experience of it, it really wasn't to bring more color into my life. It was really numbing myself from feeling anything negative, essentially. That's what I use them for, really. But I think that for me, and this is something that we talk about quite a lot as well, and it's one of those questions that we never really come to any sort of conclusion with regards to whether trauma is something that must be experienced in order to, wake up, in a sense. But, just like you, I always say that I would have never been courageous enough to do the things that I do now. Looking back, the person I was before I was diagnosed, I would have still been in corporate finance and just climbing that ladder and, making a shit ton of money, but, being incredibly unhappy with my life. And I knew it as well, that was the contrast for me. I know that was different to you, but before cancer, I had a mask that sort of painted a happy face, but I hated my life, really. I hated a lot of who I was, and I knew it. I didn't know it on an intellectual level, but I certainly felt it, and the feelings were very, very strong. But I chose to ignore them because that would have meant me losing the identity that I had painted for myself, which I was so attached to at that point in time. And to me, like any type of trauma, whether it's like, and I think the degree of trauma is subjective for everyone, right? It's different. So to me, there's no real point of comparison in terms of one's worse than the other or vice versa. But trauma and things like this really are just little signs to give us a warning as to something that needs to change. And it's really whether we pay attention to that or not. Attention is the first part, you spoke about awareness, and I think that's key. Awareness is the first thing. Once you're aware, then it's up to us and whether we, I guess, have the courage to make that choice point to expand rather than contract. And I think that's it for me in terms of whether people need, quote unquote, need to experience some sort of traumatic experience. I think, like I said, it can vary in degree. Like it could be a stubbed toe, that can be a revelatory experience for one person. But for me personally, I certainly needed the cancer to kick me up the arse and change my life for the better, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I needed that wake up call on unfortunately just such that kind of scale, that kind of dramatic scale, in order for me to really wake up and realize what my life could be, and kind of, again, like we were saying before, peel back those layers. Because to kind of circle back, like, everyone has trauma in their life to some degree, maybe not cancer. And it may be like there may be that one person that glides through life without this serious like trauma that we consider to be like physical or something like that, but it may be actually a soul wound from like an ancestral past or whatever. And like your journey, your dharma, your purpose on this planet in this lifetime may be to actually uncover that deeper soul wound that's not on the physical plane, and you could be holding in your energetic body from a past life, which like is actually what we talk about in the second part of our method, which is all about the unbound, which is all about kind of unblocking from these past traumas or present traumas and becoming aware of them and how to unbound and untether from them and honor them, honestly, honor those traumas in order to fully release and find the higher lesson. And yeah, everyone, I feel like trauma is completely subjective. I love how you framed that, because it doesn't, I do believe that you need some sort of trauma, but that trauma can look different for each and every person. It doesn't always have to be like on the physical plane. It could be like emotional, mental, it could be spiritual, like a past life, but that's kind of what being in a human body and having a spiritual experience is all about. It's the growth.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I think there's, you both just mentioned different levels of trauma and things. I think a lot of what any type of really difficult or traumatic experience does, when I think about it, is it kind of makes you question everything, right? And it makes you question everything leading up to that point. And when Les was when I found out that Les had cancer, right? For me personally, right, I was like, my best mate, this happened to him. What's going to happen? See, Les and I had lost contact for a little while, right? And then when we reconnected, it was actually, I'd found out that he had cancer and he'd already been through the treatment and everything, right? So I was like, holy shit for a second. Then I was like, all right, he's going to be okay. And sort of thought about, but what it did for me personally, right? And I think about it, like it's selfish of me, but what it did for me was it made me question my own mortality, because we were really young, right? And I was living this corporate life as well of just persistently stressed, doing things that, in hindsight, I was doing because I was just a people pleaser, right? And that was the way that I used to get validation, and I felt successful. If I did a good job and someone was like, yep, you're awesome at that, that's what I thought made me feel good. And then when Liz, told me about how it had cancer and what had gone through, and it made me question, like, well, if that had been me in that situation and had things gone differently, and you were faced with your mortality, what would you feel about your life up until this point? And is this how you would want to have lived, and for this to be it? Right. And it woke me up. Like, that fucking woke me up, because I was like, I don't want to be like, if this was it, I would not be happy with that. Like, if the life I've lived up to now was it, I would feel like I've left so much on the table in terms of what I could experience and how I want to feel and what I want to experience. And, not too long after I left my corporate job, it was one of the things that I can definitively point to that helped me to get on the path that I wanted to walk, that it made me become introspective, work out what I wanted at that time in my life, and to take those steps to do it. Because I was like, well, if you don't do it and you're faced with this sort of situation and it turns out a bit differently, you could never experience what you want. And, like, I feel very fortunate that I didn't have to have that traumatic experience, but it served me as well. But it made me, my point is, it made me face my own mortality at that point in time. And to think about, well, what if you don't do all these things that you're thinking about? What if you don't do these things that keep coming up in your heart and you just keep like pushing back down because, but no, I'm doing this right now. I've got to make sure this is taken care of, and I've got to make sure that's in place before I do this. And you also realize a lot of the things you tell yourself are just excuses to not do stuff that's hard to get on the path of. I'd love to know from you, Kara, if in your life post cancer and having what I would call, like an awakening, if there's things you do that are just much harder now, but they don't feel as hard, if you had thought about it before you'd had these experiences. Is that something you could talk about for us?
So things that are much harder now?
Yeah, so things like, if you looked at them, in retrospect, things that you're doing now that if you had thought about embarking on those paths, you would have been like, shit, that's really hard. I don't know if I'm going to do that now. Because like for me, that's what happens now. I'm like, I think about, what if I don't do this? Right? Has that been the experience for you?
I mean, yeah, I feel like I wouldn't do a lot of things if I thought about the entire trajectory and arc of the journey. Like if I thought that, getting my meditation teacher certification would take, months, whereas sometimes it's framed as a week, or building a business to, 6 figures and above would take years rather than, months. That we see all these success stories all the time that we think everything's going to happen overnight. But I mean, as cliche as it is, like the journey is like what it's all about. And I feel like we're faced with these different paths. Like going back to the mortality conversation, and I feel like I asked myself, this may be a bit morbid, and that's maybe because I've looked death straight in the eyes, but I feel like when I'm making a hard decision and I'm spinning out and I feel like I can't come to a decision, I feel like I come back to the question, well, if I'm gone tomorrow, what would I kind of do? And that helps me gain clarity right away on if I need to move forward with it or not. I kind of like tap in, and that helps me glean a little bit more insight and gain more clarity. But I feel like, to answer your question, it's just like everything is hard work, but that's where like the fulfillment, I guess, stems from. I feel like trying to think of a specific circumstance, because I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, to be honest, but I never wanted to necessarily work with like impact brands or purpose-driven brands, or work with individuals, to be honest. I'm just starting to work with individuals, and that is incredibly draining and a lot of hard work, but it's some of the most fulfilling work. And it's, when I get these texts or these DMs or these emails that are like, you kind of changed my life, or you've changed my day or my month. I look at life differently. I love differently. That's what is so magnificent and fulfilling, but it's also not where the money is for me. The money is building brands, but like the most fulfilling part of my job is working with individuals. It's also the hardest, but I feel like if I never would have really been pushed on that path if it wasn't for what I've been through either. And if I knew how hard it would be working with individuals, I don't think I would have ever began. But I'm so glad that like each and every step that I've taken over the past, 3 years plus of building a business has led up to working with individuals. And it was in a really organic way, coaching overall. Like I started building brands and businesses, which I still do today, but it was like the consulting clients, or the team and my consultants that I was working with on a collaborative basis in my collective that I would work with brands started coming to me for like coaching advice when I wasn't really a coach. And so it was kind of like, it just organically happened, but I never would have gone down that path. Knowing that it was so hard. And I'm working on a project right now that I can't speak enough. That's like really top of mind with like how hard it is to really do. And I probably never, I'm like in the middle of it right now. And I feel like if I would have known how hard it is, I never would have began. And it's just like, you just have to take that one step though, and keep on putting one foot in front of the other. And, each day take like one thing maybe off that to-do list, or not even that to-do list, or like, I call it a get to-do list actually, because we have the ability, we have the gift to do these things every day. You're in the driver's seat of your life, but that's a long-winded answer, but
yeah. Love it. Love it. I mean, look, a couple of things I think to round off the whole conversation on mortality. I mean, I don't think it's morbid at all. I think that we're sort of in this culture where we somehow ignore the fact that we're eventually going to die, but at the same time, we really love facts and things that are factual, and isn't that one of the very certainties of life is that when we are born, we are eventually going to die someday. And I think it's a beautiful gift to have that front of mind all the time, that's why I resonate so deeply with Stoic philosophy, of ancient Greeks. They have a saying, memento mori, which is remember your mortality, and that was always front of mind for them, and it allowed them to achieve the greatest things they ever wanted to, and craft this beautiful philosophy for life that is still, after 2,000 plus years, is still relevant today. And I guess on the part of, hard work and things like this, and the get to do, I love the get to do list. I mean, look, the get to do thing is a beautiful way to frame the gift of life, which it is a gift. We always talk about this, and that, the statistics of, being born the way you are, where you are, and the time you are, and all these variables of your unique life as an individual. It's like 400 trillion to one or something like this. I know you can look it up. I think that is the figure, but you can win the lottery, multiple times over before you hit those types of odds. So if you haven't, if life isn't a gift, then what is? Like we owe it to the fact that we are alive, and we owe it to every single breath that we get to take, right? To honor that and respect the shit out of it, and do what we're supposed to do. It's our like innate duty, in my mind, to live and live to our fullest potential, right? It's sad that a lot of people are so there's so much potential in every single one of us, but a lot of the time it's suppressed and it's not fulfilled for whatever reason. But in my mind, it's our duty, and it transcends, every sort of social concept, social ideal, any sort of semblance of, a collective value, whether it's money or whatever it is. It transcends all of that, To me, I say that, life is a gift for us to, discover our own gifts, to then give away the gift that we discover, right? I think that's how I see my life anyway. And I think it's a beautiful privilege to be able to do that, in my mind. So I think that the one-on-one work, the coaching work is extremely fulfilling. I do the same thing, and I think that each of us have, some wisdom to impart on those that resonate with us as individuals. And yeah, I mean, I think we each have some form of medicine to give to the world. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a nice place to sort of nicely put a bow on this conversation. Cara, thanks for joining us on the conversation. It was a beautiful chat. I'd love to, have you tell our audience a little bit about what you're working on right now, and where they can find you, and anything else you want to sort of plug for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. What a beautiful way to end that conversation. You can find me at Boundless by Cara on Instagram, and boundlessbycara.com. And my conscious consultancy is Boundless Creatives. And you can find us at Boundless Creatives on Instagram. I am like the quintessential multi-hyphenate entrepreneur. I'm working on so many different things, but our tagline is we really help people discover their spiritual purpose, their introspective purpose, so they can give a gift, so they can give an impact brand, they can build an impact brand and create boundless impact. And I just love that. I'm going to take that little gem with me. You have to be, what was it again?
Which one?
About impact, like giving impact. You have to like
Oh,
be impact.
the gift of life is to discover your gift so that you can eventually give away your gift.
Oh,
yeah.
I love it. I mean, that's what being boundless is all about.
Yeah.
But we are working on so many different things. We have our most recent launch is our Soulbound Circle. So it's a monthly mindful membership of virtual gatherings, mind, body, business, and soul up-leveling gatherings. And there's one virtual gathering a month, and it's based on the Boundless method. So in addition to that virtual gathering, you have an inbound meditation, unbound journaling prompts, rebound rituals. And then Boundless is just like that connectedness to community and greater connectedness to yourself. And that was built on Soulbound, our course that we launched during COVID, but was actually manifestation seeds were planted far before that. But that's our 4-week starter course to spiritual self-discovery. Those are our 2 core offerings for individuals, in addition to our 2021 Boundless Intentions Journal, which is just kind of this beautiful sacred space where you can write your intentions every month and hold yourself accountable to your goals. And that's also includes the Boundless method as well. And if you're a small business or a corporation that is looking to connect with a purpose-driven consultant, we do more spiritual meet strategic work with Fortune 500 companies to help really bring modern mindfulness to the masses. So we love working with impact brands in particular, so sustainable, clean beauty, spiritual, and beyond. And so many other projects and so many other things to come, as I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with nowadays. But it all comes back to finding like the magic in the mundane and in the day-to-day, and really embodying the gift and the light of what this life really has, which is what you really spoke on at the end of this conversation. So thank you so much again for having me. This was such a beautiful like finale to my evening. And yeah, I'm just so filled right now. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And, honoring you for the amazing, beautiful work that you do. I'll definitely take all those links and put them into the show notes so people can find you easily. Shauna, where can people find you, mate?
Yeah, easiest place to find me is on Instagram. So it's Shaun_Coop. So SHAUN_COOP. And people can also find us at true_north.co on Instagram, or head to true-north.co. That's the website for our True North program, which we're kicking off in March. And how about you, Les? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, fightingspace.co. My one-on-one mentorship and group mentorship and meditation program are all on there, as well as some other goodies and things like this. So if you want to get in touch with me there, it's fightingspace.co, and on Instagram and Facebook as well, it's at fightingspace.co.
And Kai, I just want to take the opportunity as well to thank you for joining us today and sharing your story and all these insights that you have about being boundless. And I would really implore people to look at what you're doing and how you're helping people, and hopefully they're able to glean some wisdom from you. I think that there's so much I can see that you have to offer people, and your energy is just amazing. So I really want to commend you for that and putting it out there as well, because I think it's one thing to have the energy, but another thing to be able to actually channel it, right? And with all the things you have going on, I think it's it's amazing that you're able to do that so effectively.
Thank you so much. So it all comes back to taking that one step. It's not you don't become boundless overnight.
Yeah, sure, that's the case. And if you're listening to this and you took something from this conversation, a little gem, a little nugget, we ask that you just share it with one other person. That's how we grow the podcast, a family member, a friend, or a colleague. we have these conversations and offer up different perspectives so that we can think differently, hopefully approach things from a different point of view that we may not have thought about, and think better and feel better, we can do better. So until next time, guys, thanks.
See you guys.
Thank you.